The Uyghur people are largely known today for being at the epicenter of Chinese repression in Xinjiang. Yet, it hasn't always been this way, and today we'll look at how the Uyghur people went from the leaders of Central Asia centuries ago to the victims of repressive regimes today. Hello, I am your host David, and welcome to Eurasia. Without further ado, let's talk about the history of the Uyghur people right now. While Chinese experts state that the Uyghur people's history is about 1,000 years old, archaeological evidence and Uyghur historians have found that Uyghur people have a history nearly 3,000 years old. Much of the history of the Uyghur people before the 8th century AD is quite blurry, however. The Uyghurs did not keep written records, and thus, most of the history only comes from oral traditions and archaeological finds. However, starting in the 8th century, the Uyghur people started to become more important in the region. They started keeping written records, and early in the 8th century, the Uyghur Khanate was born. The Khanate's creation was a response to the Göktürk, or Turkic Khanate's rule, which had been ruling over the area where many Uyghur people were living. This area consists of modern-day Mongolia, Xinjiang, eastern Kazakhstan, and southern Siberia. Upon the Khanate's creation, two similar people in the region, the Karluks and the Basmals, joined in an alliance with the Uyghur people against the Göktürks. The Basmals would take over the Göktürks' capital in 744, only to be turned on by the Karluks and Uyghurs. After a short civil war, the Basmal people were all killed or integrated, and the Karluks were absorbed into or pushed out of the Uyghur Khanate. The Uyghur Khanate consisted of 9 tribes, or, as it is known and translates in Uyghur, Tokuz Uquz. These tribes originally formed a confederacy in order to rule the Uyghur Khanate. The leader was named the Khagan. Only 15 years after the sacking of the Turkic capital, the Uyghur Khanate extended from modern-day Manchuria to Kazakhstan, and from southern Siberia to southern Xinjiang. The Uyghur Khanate had 2 goals. The first was to bring all the nomadic Turkic tribes under the Uyghur Khanate. The second was to establish and sustain trade with the Tang Dynasty in the southeast. From about 745 to 765, the Tang Dynasty and Uyghur Khanate established a flourishing trade partnership. Starting in about 765, with the Tang Dynasty declining, the Uyghur Khanate demanded tribute from the Tang. The Tang agreed. The Chinese would not have a presence in Xinjiang for another millennia. The Uyghur Khanate seen many of its neighbors attacking them after this. The Yenisei Kyrgyz staged a counter-offensive around 763 after the Uyghur Khanate attacked them. The remaining Karluk people that had earlier been expelled from the Uyghur Khanate regrouped and attacked the Uyghurs in 789. Then, in 790, after the Uyghurs attacked the Tibetans began attacking the Uyghur Khanate in response. This all culminated into one of the leaders of the original 9 Uyghur tribes betraying the Khanate and escaping to the Yenisei Kyrgyz in order to ask for help in defeating the Khanate in 840. Within a few weeks, the Kyrgyz burned the Uyghur capital, killed the Khagan, and raided other cities around the Uyghur Khanate. Between 840 and 847, the Uyghur Khanate tried to push out the Kyrgyz, but the Uyghur Khanate was powerless and defeated by 847. Yet, the Kyrgyz had little interest in creating their own Khanate. Moreover, they wanted to defeat the Uyghur Khanate in order to stop their constant attacks on the Kyrgyz. The Kyrgyz pushed the Uyghurs east and south while occasionally raiding any Uyghur settlements that would come near their borders. Though it did happen, any attempt at recreating the Khanate would be put down by other empires in the region. Between 847 and 1209, the surrounding people groups would create the Kara-Khanid Khanate. The Kara-Khanid Khanate would adopt Islam in about 950 AD, and soon after many Uyghur people would adopt Islam as well. This process of conversion would continue for the next 500 years, despite the Kara-Khanid Khanate's demise and the Uyghur people's absorption into the Mongol Empire. After the Mongol Empire's collapse and a few relatively irrelevant Khanates that had followed, the Jungar Khanate grew in power in the Xinjiang region in the early 1600s. The Jungars came in direct conflict with the Qing dynasty by the late 1600s, and by the 1750s, the Qing had overtaken the Jungar people. The Qing then recognizably employed the strategy of killing any Jungars who did not agree or accept Qing culture. Nearly 80% of the Jungar people, or about 600,000 people, were killed by the Qing. Yet, this time, the Uyghurs helped the Chinese. Opposite of today, the Qing recognized the Uyghurs as an important part of Qing society and included them along with the Hui, Han, and Jibei people in the repopulation of the Jianxing region. Interestingly though, few Han, Hui, or Jibei people would move to the Jianxing region at first, so the Qing had essentially made Jianxing into a Uyghur homeland themselves. The Uyghurs would continue to help the Qing against foreign threats until the Qing dynasty fell in 1912. By 1920, the Uyghurs had seen a complete swap in relations with China. The Republic of China had started to push more Chinese integration onto the Uyghurs, and revolts became common. In 1933 and 1944, the Uyghurs declared their independence from the Republic of China. Backed with weapons and support by the Soviet Union, the Uyghur people had solidified themselves as enemies of the Chinese government. Yet, with the People's Republic of China's assumption of power in 1949, Mao Zedong would see a loosening of tensions between the Chinese government and the Uyghur people. Despite forcing Jianxing back into China, Mao would allow the Uyghur people some autonomy, while also allowing many Uyghurs a path into the government and power if they accepted Chinese rule as well as communism. However, in Mao's later years as chairman, the Uyghur people would see more repression. By the 1980s, Uyghur people were not allowed many of the rights that other people groups had in China. By the 1990s, the birth of radical Uyghur separatists was met with increased suppression from the Chinese government. By the 2000s, riots and protests broke out throughout the entire region. And, as many know, today, the Chinese government has felt inclined to completely erase the Uyghur identity by creating re-education camps. These camps have been criticized by much of the international community as Stalinist-era gulags, meant to completely remove the Uyghur people from China either through adoption or death. More and more camps are being built every day, while more and more Uyghurs are being detained as well. It is estimated that out of 11 million Uyghurs living in China today, about 1 million are in these internment camps. Though these internment camps have been in Jianxing for an estimated 10 years, the Chinese project has only in the past year been exponentially increasing. Thankfully, this has caused much of the international community to call attention to it. On March 13, 2019, US diplomats called for a united European and American condemnation and sanctions on China until non-partial international experts could visit and understand China's internment camps. As of now, countries in the West as well as throughout the world are showing interest in agreeing. Turkey, the United Kingdom, and India have also been leading the way for international condemnation of China. All in all, the history of the Uyghur people extends more than 2,000 years into the past. The Uyghur people have a rich history. Though the Uyghur nation peaked in the 9th century, the Uyghur people continue to push on despite living in a highly repressive environment today. Don't forget to subscribe and click the like button as well. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay happy, stay humble, stay hopeful, and goodbye.